Alright guys, we're back for the Double M Bookie beatdown for Noche UFC, taking place this Saturday from Las Vegas, Nevada at the Sphere. I'm not going to go over every single fight. You know the drill, you know how this goes. I give you my favorite bets, my favorite leans, and my favorite long shots for some of the fights on the card. I'm going to start it off with the first fight up on the early prelims with Raul Rosas Jr. over Arichi Long. I mean, this is kind of self-explanatory. I think they want to get a finish. They want to get a big win for a Mexican fighter. And that's what they want. So I think that's what they're going to get. Arichi Long has the possibility to knock out Rosas Jr. He's better at managing distance. He's better at managing range. And he has the much cleaner striking on the feet. However, I don't think he has the takedown defense to deal with a fighter like Rosas Jr., especially with a fast-paced, heavy, aggressive grappler like Rosas. So I think Rosas gets in close, takes him down, takes his back, and finds a way to get a rear naked choke in the first 2 rounds. I like Rosas by sub. The numbers aren't out yet for this fight, and I like Rosas Jr. to win in round 1 and round 2. He'll probably get plus 110, plus 120 maybe. For sub, maybe even money. Not going to be as good of odds as the fight against Tercios, but I think he finishes him, and I think he finishes him early. So I would take Rosas Jr. by sub, Rosas Jr. round 1, round 2. If you want to play Arichi Long, I would not recommend it, but I would take Arichi Long by KO because I think he's the much better striker, but I don't really think it's going to matter for this fight. So let's move on to the next one. All right, up next is Manuel Torres against Ignacio Bahamondes. I'm on the Torres side. I know a lot of people like the reach, the range, the distance control, and the striking of Bahamondes, and he's going to have higher output. You know, that's something we've already discussed on the breakdown, but I think the forward pressure, the power, and the finishing ability in that first 10 minutes is going to be too much for Bahamondes, who we've seen get cracked, hurt, and rocked in multiple fights before. I've seen Ignacio get hurt badly by Ludovic Klein, who, yes, is probably a more technical striker than a guy like Torres, but he doesn't have the grappling and jiu-jitsu that a guy like Torres can fall back on if he does rock Ignacio on the feet and then, you know, potentially takes his neck or jumps and takes his back like he did against Chris Duncan. So I like Torres to win by KO. I think that there is some submission equity, but I think Bahamondes could probably defend a sub. But again, it could be a situation where he gets cracked and panic wrestles and then, you know, Torres takes his back and chokes him or jumps on the guillotine choke and submits him that way. Torres has a lot more submissions than KOs, or I think he has more KOs than subs, but it's pretty close. But I like Torres round 1, round 2, plus 165. I think if he wins, it is in that first 10 minutes. I think if it gets to round 3, Bahamondes probably wins that round at a pretty high clip. And then I like Torres by KO plus 250. I would even sprinkle on Manuel Torres by submission. I think it's plus 400, plus 500. I think just to cover you, the best bet would probably be Torres round 1, round 2, and then maybe throw a little bit on the sub because you're going to get a much higher number than the KO for Manuel. But I think the pressure, the power, the finishing ability, the grappling, and the aggressiveness of Manuel Torres, even though he's not the best defensively, I think he's going to beat a guy like Ignacio, who we've seen have trouble with pressure fighters. So give me Torres round 1, round 2, plus 165, and give me Torres by KO plus 250. And if you want, take a little sprinkle on Torres by submission, because I do think that that is something that can happen, which is why I played the round 1, round 2. All right, up next is Irene Aldana, but by knockout at plus 700. And I also like the KO round 2, round 3 at plus 1400. Aldana is a much higher volume striker. She's a much better striker than Norma Dumont. Obviously, the grappling is going to be the biggest question against a girl like Norma. We've seen Aldana give up takedowns. We've seen her get controlled on the ground. But even when she got taken down and controlled, she landed an up kick to the liver of Macy Chasson and won that fight by knockout later on in the fight. Round 2, round 3. I think Aldana can do the same thing, but I also think she's going to be able to defend a lot of the takedowns of a girl like Norma Dumont. Dumont's one of my favorite fighters in the women's divisions as well. She has decent striking, she has decent power behind her combinations, but I think that the fighter who's going to have the better cardio over the 3 rounds is Aldana. We've seen Aldana push a very high pace on the feet with multiple shot combinations, ripping to the head, ripping to the body, changing levels with her boxing combos, and I think she can kind of break a girl like Norma Dumont down the stretch. I know a lot of people are going to look to the Germaine de Randamie fight and say that's not going to happen. There's no chance that, you know, if she was able to take down a girl like de Randamie and win as many minutes of that fight as she did, then she'll do the same thing to Aldana, and that does make sense, but I also think Aldana has a higher output than Germaine de Randamie. She's more dangerous on the feet than de Randamie, and I think Aldana knows when she's down on the scorecards, and she knows when she has to pick up the pace, and I think that's something that really makes a difference here. Is if she does lose that first round, we know she's going to come out heavy, we know she's going to come out hard, and we know that she's going to push a pace down the stretch in this fight. I think she could drop Dumont with a body shot. I think she can even hurt her up top to the head, and I think she can outpace her with the striking on the feet, and it's going to get harder for Dumont to get those takedowns in the 2nd and 3rd round. Obviously, we could see a blanket boring decision for a girl like Dumont. Dumont is a decent striker in her own right, but I don't think she's at the level of striking that a girl like Irene Aldana is. So I like Aldana by KO plus 700, and I like the KO 2-3 at plus 1400 because, like I said, I think if she does get that KO, it's an attritional finish where she has a tough first round, gets takedowns or stuffs takedowns enough to get Dumont tired, and then starts ripping up top and then blasting those hooks to the body, and I think she crumbles her with a body shot and finishes her with a TKO. She doesn't have a ton of KOs in her career, but Aldana's legit, and her striking is some of the best in the women's division. So give me KO round 2, round 3, plus 1400, and just give me the straight up KO plus 700 for this fight. Up next, I've got Ronaldo Rodriguez, or Lazy Boy Rodriguez, over Ode Osbourne. I think anything under minus 180 for Ronaldo Rodriguez is a decent play on the money line, so that's why I included the money line at minus 148. Ode Osbourne does fight close with a lot of guys. He has had a knockout in the UFC before. We've seen him get a couple KOs actually, but I think the grappling, the submissions, and the wrestling of Ronaldo Rodriguez is going to be too much. Now, this is a guy that you are going to be kind of worried because we've only seen him compete in the UFC one time. And, you know, he was getting outstruck on the feet. He was getting outlanded. But he came back. He ripped some good left and right hooks, you know, really sat down on his punches. And then once the fight got to the ground, you know, Rodriguez was able to go for submissions off of his back, triangles, arm bars, look for sweeps. And he's a very active guy. And the minute he got on top, he looked to take the back and he looked for a finish. He's an aggressive submission grappler, and I think that's something that's kind of Ode Osbourne's kryptonite. If you stand and strike with him and try to play a point fighting style of matchup, you're going to have the possibility where Ode just outstrikes you, uses his length, uses his reach, and wins that fight by a decision. You know, that is definitely in the cards for Ode if he stands on the feet with Rodriguez, but I don't think he's going to have this takedown defense or the submission defense to be able to last for 3 rounds. And I think the takedowns, the top control, and the ability of Rodriguez to go for submissions, hunt the neck, maybe go for an armbar, go for a rear naked choke, I think he's going to find a submission in this fight. I like the money line minus 148. If it goes, like I said, to minus 170, minus 180, then I would say probably stay away from it. But I love the buy submission for Ronaldo Lazy Boy Rodriguez. Plus 350. I think that's a gift. I really do, and I think if he gets a sub, it's probably early. I wouldn't think it would be in the 3rd round. It's probably in the first 10 minutes, just like the Manuel Torres KO we talked about earlier. So I like the submission round 1, round 2 at plus 470. But if you just want to play the sub, plus 350 is a great number. I'm surprised it's not like plus 200, plus 190. I think plus 350 is a gift for the submission line for Ronaldo Lazy Boy Rodriguez. I think he's able to out-grapple Ode Osbourne. I think he's able to exploit an area of Osbourne's game that we've seen exploited multiple times in his UFC career before. We've seen him get submitted a few times in the UFC as well, and I think Rodriguez is going to find the way to the back, put that rear naked choke in, and get a submission within round 1 or round 2. So I like sub round 1, round 2, plus 470. Plus 350 on the sub is good enough by itself, especially if you're single betting it for half a unit or a unit. But I think the money line is also good for some parlays. I like this guy. I know, again, it's a guy we haven't seen in the UFC too much, so we do have some concerns about his durability on the feet, but I think this guy is so calm, so patient. He doesn't mind getting into brawls on the feet, and I think he's going to be able to land some strikes on O'Day, get him to respect him, find a way to get the takedown, win the scramble, take the back, and get the submission. Yeah, give me Ronaldo Rodriguez by sub plus 350 and sub 1-2 plus 470. All right, up next is a money line play that I'm surprised a lot of people are taking, but I'm also not surprised because I do believe this is probably one of the best underdogs on the card in Esteban Ribovic over Daniel Zellhuber. If you're looking to parlay, the money line is your best bet, but I think the activity, the forward pressure, and the combinations paired up with the power that Ribovic has, I think it's going to give Daniel Zellhuber some trouble. Obviously, there's a chance that Zellhuber just snipes him by using his reach, using his distance control, and using the range. He can catch him coming in, you know, staying at distance, using his jab, using his kicks. You know, even has some submissions. He was able to get a submission over Christos Giagos. He's going to be at an 8-inch reach advantage, 77-inch reach to a 69-inch reach for Esteban. But Esteban is a I don't give a F style of fighter. He's going to get in your face. He's going to crash that pocket, close the distance, rip hooks to the body, rip shots up top. He's got good combinations that he can punctuate with head kicks like we've seen in the fight against Terrence McKinney. And this dude has power. He has more power than Daniel Zellhuber. And I think if there is a finish in this fight, it comes from the side of Esteban Ribovic. And when you're giving me a guy as an underdog who I believe has the higher finishing upside, who's going to have the higher output, I believe, in this fight, and probably be able to push a high pace for 3 rounds, I got to go with Esteban Ribovic. We've seen that this guy has good cardio. I've seen him get taken down, get controlled for the first round, come back out in the second and third, make it a lot harder for his opponents to get takedowns, rip shots up top, you know, throw good combinations to the body and to the head. And that was against Kamuela Kirk, who is a much higher level grappler than a Zellhuber, even though Zellhuber, I believe, is a much better striker. But I think Esteban can really wear on a guy like Daniel Zellhuber as long as he doesn't get countered on the way in. But we don't see Zellhuber get a lot of knockouts in his UFC career. We've seen him hurt guys, but he really isn't a knockout artist like everybody claims this dude to be. And I think Esteban is durable. He's going to have the higher output. He's going to have the better cardio in the second and third round. And I think he's going to push a much higher pace to the point where he can probably break a guy like Daniel Zellhuber in the second or the third round. I think the money line is good at plus 190. I think KO decision is a good play because, you know, you never know. Even if he wins clearly in your eyes, they might give it to the Mexican fighter because it is Noche UFC. But I think KO decision is the best way to do a double chance because I don't really see submission equity for Esteban against a fighter like Zellhuber. That's at plus 200. At that point, you kind of probably want to just play the money line. But I also like the KO for Esteban. I think this guy can wear on Zellhuber, get in his face, and break him, you know, in the 10 to 15 minute mark of this fight. You know, the second and third round, midpoint of the second into the third, I think he's going to keep coming, keep pushing forward. Maybe he has a hard first round, but continues to move forward, continues to throw combinations, and continues to close that distance and tire a guy like Zellhuber out, who's going to be on the back foot for the majority of the fight, just based on his counter-striking style and his reach advantage. But I think Zellhuber is going to be, you know, pushed back, made to get tired, and I think Esteban's going to be able to close the distance and crash the pocket. So I like not Zellhuber. I like Esteban Ribovic by KO, plus 650. That is a crazy number. I think he can knock Zellhuber out, kind of like an attritional finish like Aldana against Dumont. I think he can kind of just rip to the body, rip up top, put combinations together, and I think he is the side in this fight because Zellhuber has not been extremely impressive, and I think this guy has the forward pressure, the output, and the volume, and the finishing ability to just push Zellhuber back and make him uncomfortable. And you have to make a guy uncomfortable who uses his reach, uses his length, and is very technical, and I think that Esteban Ribovic can do just that. So give me Esteban by KO plus 650, KO or decision, double chance, plus 200, and the money line at plus 190, just in case maybe he rocks him and can find a submission. But I'm on the Esteban Ribovic side or Ribovic side all day when it comes to breaking down this fight. All right, next up, I got Diego Lopez over Brian Ortega, and I got Diego Lopez by a vicious knockout. I definitely think Ortega can win, and he's actually going to be the next subject after we talk about Diego Lopez, but I just think Lopez is too fast and too mean for a guy like Ortega. You know, if you go back and you watch the fight against Yair Rodriguez, he got clipped and rocked early in that fight multiple times in the first round, except, you know, he was able to survive a guy like Yair. And I do believe Yair is the more versatile striker compared to a guy like Lopez. He throws more kicks, spinning kicks, body kicks, head kicks, you know, you name it. But he doesn't have that boxing ability that Diego Lopez has. He's the cleaner technical striker, but once they get on the inside, when they're in clinch range, when they're in close range, those hooks, those uppercuts from inside the clinch, the dirty boxing of Diego Lopez, I think that's going to give Ortega a lot of trouble, because the one thing Ortega wants to do is get in close, take down Diego Lopez, tire him out, get to the top position on the ground, go for an arm triangle, take the back, go for a rear naked choke, maybe have Lopez shoot a bad takedown, go for a Darce choke, jump a guillotine. I mean, that's what Ortega wants. Ortega wants to close the distance, get takedowns, and get on top of a guy like Lopez. But again, this is the first time in Ortega's career where he's fighting somebody who has equal or better jiu-jitsu than himself. So even if he gets rocked by Lopez, he might shoot a takedown to try to, you know, recover, and he might get wrapped up in a Darce. He might get caught in a guillotine. He might get caught in a flying triangle, transition to an armbar. You know, this is the first time we've seen Ortega go up against somebody who can compete in the jiu-jitsu realm, which is usually his ace of spades, which is usually his Uno reverse card to get himself out of bad positions and bad situations, and he's not really going to have that here against a guy in Lopez who is the more powerful striker, the more dangerous fighter, the more dangerous finisher, and a guy who comes out like a house of fire in those first two rounds. I like Diego Lopez by knockout plus 275, and if you want to think that maybe he hurts him and then subs him, because like I said, this is the first time Ortega's facing somebody with equal or better jiu-jitsu, then just take round 1, round 2 for Diego Lopez at plus 200. I think it's the KO, so if you want to sprinkle KO round 1, round 2, you'll probably get plus 400, maybe a little bit higher, but I like the KO. I think Lopez hurts Ortega early and doesn't allow him to recover, and either finishes him off with ground and pound or just lands too many shots on the feet and puts him out. So give me Diego Lopez by knockout plus 275, Diego Lopez to win in round 1, round 2 at plus 200. I think this is the new era, and I think Lopez is going to make a statement in this fight. And we did say that Ortega was the next subject, and it's a simple play. Sub round 2 plus 2600, sub round 3 plus 3100. I think Ortega has the better cardio. If it was a 5-round fight, I might even lean towards Ortega in the 3rd, 4th, or 5th. But I think if he's able to survive an early barrage, if he's able to weather the storm, then Ortega might be able to get those takedowns. He might be able to wind up on top. He might be able to wind up in that front headlock position, and he might be able to get a sub. Maybe he finds a takedown, gets on top, locks up an arm triangle. Maybe he goes for a triangle choke. Maybe he's able to get a guillotine or a Darce, you know, off a bad shot from Lopez if he gets tired towards the midpoint of the 2nd and into the 3rd round. If I'm going to play Ortega, if I'm going to play him at all, it's sub round 2, 26-1, sub round 3, 31-1. I mean, that's the only way to play this for Ortega. If he wins, it's probably late, it's probably by sub, and it's probably because he survives the storm and tires out a guy like Lopez. So, yeah, I don't think Ortega wins, but you would be kind of stupid to not sprinkle 31-1 and a 26-1 on sub round 2, sub round 3. So, if you're going to play Ortega, sub round 2 plus 2600, sub round 3 plus 3100, hoping that he weathers the storm early. For the co-main event, I like Alexa Grasso. I think we've seen this narrative before where, you know, once the champions lose their belt, aside from Amanda Nunes against Juliana Pena, usually you don't get your belt back. And I think Grasso is at a much higher level than Juliana Pena, even though they're not the same fight. It's kind of the same story, like this dominant UFC champion, you know, beating everybody. But, you know, even before the Grasso fight, I picked Taila Santos to beat Valentina Shevchenko. And she arguably could have won that decision. And I think that's why I really doubled down on picking Alexa to beat Grasso. And I did the same thing in the second fight. Now, first fight, I picked rear naked choke round 4. And she got a 4th round sub, just like I picked Dricus to win by 4th round sub. I'm not tooting my own horn, but I had a pretty good read on that fight. I knew she wasn't going to win early, and she had to win late. Now, in the second fight, I picked her to win by submission again, I believe. She ended up going to a draw, but I think you could have given that decision to Grasso. She had a big, late round. She dropped Valentina. Valentina almost got her with a mounted guillotine choke, and she had a lot of takedowns and control time. But I think if anything, Alexa is on the upward trajectory while Valentina is on the downward trajectory. You could have gotten her as an underdog on the money line in the second fight. Now she's a favorite. It makes sense for her to be the favorite. I think you can bet the money line in terms of parlays or single bets. I think Alexa money line is a good play because I think she's just better at this point. I think Valentina has been on a slow decline, and I think the decline is just going to continue. I think Valentina gets finished. A lot of people are thinking sub, just like I picked in the first fight. I think it's going to be a KO this time. I think she's going to TKO Valentina. She hurt her on the feet. She could have finished her, almost had a rear naked choke late in the second fight, but also hurt her and rocked her and landed a bunch of good shots on the feet. I think people are sleeping on Alexa's boxing. I think they slept on it in the first fight. I think they slept on it in the second fight. And I think this time she's going to put Valentina to sleep. I don't necessarily think it's going to be like a one-punch KO, but I think Valentina can get TKO'd here by Grasso, who I believe is the much cleaner striker and definitely has the much better jab in this fight than Valentina. She finds really good timing to sneak her shots in between the shots of Valentina, and I think Grasso can find a finish here. Usually in fights like this, there's going to be one side that's much more dominant in a trilogy like this, and I think it's going to be Grasso who comes out with a win and probably comes out with a finish. I like Grasso by finish inside the distance plus 260. Like I said, I think the money line is a good play at minus 140, but I think it's more of a KO this time than a submission, and I think it's a solid play to take the KO 2-3-4 because I don't think she wins early. I think it's more down the stretch. You could take 3-4-5, but I think it probably happens in the third or fourth round. So I think KO 2-3-4 at plus 1,500, 15-1 is my favorite long shot play for this fight. I picked sub first time, sub second time. I'm going to take a shot on the KO here with KO 2-3-4 plus 1,500. I think Grasso definitely has a chance to outbox Valentina and, take advantage of a declining, older Valentina Shevchenko. And that's not a knock on Grasso's skill because I think Grasso is just the kryptonite to a girl like Valentina. So I like the money line, minus 140. I like the inside the distance, plus 260. But I think she finds a KO, and it's probably due to like an attritional finish, landing a lot of shots, Valentina, covering up and just getting stopped by Grasso. Maybe ground and pound, but I think it could even be a KO on the feet. So I like the KO 2-3-4 at plus 1,500, but I really like Grasso in this spot, and I think she's going to show you why she's the champion, especially in front of the Noche UFC crowd. She said in an interview as well that she doesn't even care about the walkout. She's just ready to go in and win the fight. She's focused, probably the focus she's ever been, and I think that's going to translate on fight night, and I think she's going to TKO Valentina Shevchenko and retain her championship with a much more dominant performance this time than the draw last time. I think the best chance Valentina had to beat her was in that second fight, and she still couldn't get it done, even though some people believe she should have got the decision. I think Grasso makes a statement here, and I like her a lot. And now we're at the main event of the evening. You've got the battle with Sugar Sean O'Malley versus Merab Dvalishvili. I'm on the side of and still. I'm on Sugar Sean O'Malley. You could have got the KO at plus 200 earlier in the week and even a couple weeks ago. It's now down at plus 170. I still think there's value there, but I think O'Malley's going to snipe Merab Dvalishvili. Even in fights where Merab wins, he can get cracked on the chin, he can get hurt, he can get wobbled, and he still continues to push through. Now, usually a guy like Sean O'Malley versus Merab, it's going to be the later rounds where Merab really wins that fight. Tiring out O'Malley, closing the distance, getting takedowns. He went for like 50 takedowns against Peter Yan. That was the best performance of his career. A very dominant performance there for Merab Dvalishvili. But the one thing that O'Malley has over a guy like Peter Yan is length, reach, distance, and Yan has really good counters, but with the length and reach of a guy like O'Malley, the counters are much more dangerous for a style like Merab. Merab is a grind nose, nose to the grindstone, close the distance, pressure fighter, overhands, uppercuts, close the distance, go for takedowns, double legs, single legs, chain wrestle, and continue to just wear on the opponent. you know, vicious volume on the ground, landing ground and pound over and over and over again. But I think the style of Merab is tailor-made for a counter-striking style like Sean O'Malley, who is longer, taller, uses his reach better, has very good back step counters with overhand lefts and rights from southpaw or orthodox. That backhand counter is always going to be there against a fighter who changes levels and crashes the pocket like a guy like Merab. And I think the knees up the middle and the uppercuts are going to be there, which coincidentally are some of Sean O'Malley's best shots. That knee he landed on Marlon Chito Vera would have knocked out any other man, and I think if that lands on the chin of Merab, Merab goes face down, ass up, and is KO'd completely stiff. I think the feints to the uppercuts are there for Sean O'Malley against Merab, and you know, he knows what Merab's going to do. Now, there could be a Khabib-Conor situation where Merab lands a big overhand off of a feint and rocks O'Malley because O'Malley's not respecting his striking, but I think O'Malley's too smart for that. I think O'Malley's going to respect the striking of Merab coming in. I think he's going to respect the distance, and I think he's just going to manage distance and range much better and make it very difficult for Merab to close the distance without eating a bunch of counters and shots on the way in. So I like Merab, or I'm sorry, not Merab. I like O'Malley by KO plus 170. I even think KO round 2, just like he knocked out Aljamain, is a decent play for like a single bet at plus 950. But my favorite play would be KO 2, 3, 4, because I think if O'Malley gets the knockout, it's in that middle section of rounds. I think if we get to round 5, it's probably more going towards the side of Dvalishvili. So KO 2, 3, 4 plus 340, KO round 2 plus 950, or just straight up KO for Sean O'Malley plus 170. I think all of those numbers and all of those lines have a lot of value, and I'm picking the Sugar Show. I'm backing the Sugar Show to win this fight by knockout against Merab. This is going to be it for my video on UFC 306, Noche UFC. Let's make some money this weekend and enjoy the great historic card that Dana White is giving us.